If you're looking to get ahead of the curve in your marketing to really set the tone and become the market of one, you're really going to enjoy today's show. So fellas, I want to talk about what was hot in 2024 and what our predictions are for really being on the cutting edge, leading, not having arrows shot in your back, but being forward thinking in our marketing for 2025. So Jimmy, you have been doing a tremendous amount of research on Instagram.
Yeah.
Obviously listing leads with email, direct mail, postcards, letters, now YouTube.
Yeah.
I'd be super curious from your standpoint first, what was hot in 2025? We did a show on this, recently, but let's go a little deeper. What was hot for marketing in 2024?
Yeah.
And what do you think is going to be really hot in 25?
I think what was hot in 24 that we're going to see explode in 25 was the rise of the faceless creator.
The rise of the faceless creator.
And we've seen this where we've seen these channels that like Chelsea McCarty, who is an agent out of DC who has 63,000 followers. She produces these videos that are short form reels that are maybe 30 seconds long, many of which have gotten over 1 million views. And I was DMing with her recently, and she is shocked by how fast and how effective her channel has been. And you will never see her in a single reel. And so we've seen this sort of, I say we've been gravitating towards replacing ourselves, right? Using HeyGen and other AI tools. So like you have our version of AI.
Yeah.
But what we're seeing is consumers are completely comfortable with us not being on camera.
Right.
So I think people watching right now are going to be celebrating that, hey, you haven't been on video for 10 years. Good news. You don't have to be. You don't have to be.
Do you know what is actually one of the unbelievable advantages of this is for the number of people that we work with that run these teams, that they become these iconic brands in the marketplace.
Great point.
But then when I'm with them,
Yeah.
it is just like this all day long, right? And not to name names, but somebody recently sitting on this couch and we were sitting there like petting my dog and we're laughing, but her phone is just going off left and right because she's done, well, I'm going to give her a huge shout out. Shannon Gillette has done such a remarkable job creating this extraordinary brand. The challenge though is that everybody wants Shannon.
Yeah.
And Shannon, is a huge business and has a wonderful team that continues to expand. And she does a wonderful job with the soft handoff to the right person, for the right buyer, for the right seller. But what if she did something like this? The faceless, like, could you do both? Should you do both?
I have an opinion. I think you could do both, but on separate pages, separate channels.
Sure. And I'm so proud of you.
Yeah. She absolutely crushes it. She is iconic and legendary in her marketplace. I think you could do both, but I think they could be dedicated different channels. You have to niche down right now algorithmically. So if you do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you mix it up too broadly on a platform like Instagram, then the algorithm is going to be like, I'm so confused by you. I don't know who to show you to. And you're not going to get that recommendation engine behind you. I think you could.
So you can do 2 channels.
I think
on
you could
Instagram.
I think you could. Absolutely.
2 channels on YouTube.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think if you look across Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, if you look across the major platforms, they're all functionally about the same on that, where they're looking for niching down on your specific topic authority. But what you brought up about the faceless brand, it's fascinating. A couple of thoughts. I actually had a couple of thoughts pop up. One is this idea of discovery versus empirical search. So we were podcasting earlier, we were talking about search engines, and we were talking about the nature of people who would go to search to ask questions. There's been a long debate for years now about, is TikTok going to take the lunch of Google one day? And I know the whole ban and everything, but just functionally, is TikTok search going to replace Google search? That's been a long debated topic. And I've always said, TikTok search functions more like Pinterest search. Pinterest search is just totally different than Google search because Pinterest search is inspire me. I don't know empirically what it is I'm looking for. I'm looking to be inspired by discovery. And if you think about the way people go on Instagram and they scroll through their feeds, they're looking to be inspired and discover. And Chelsea's page is a good example of that, where it's locally optimized, which I think is a really important point to stress, is a lot of real estate agents who went not the faceless, but the face brand. They weren't necessarily locally optimized. They would talk about a broad range of topics, and then the algorithm would serve their content to a broad range of users here, there, and everywhere.
Yeah.
And they weren't amassing a local audience. But if you look at the top producers who are generating business from Instagram,
Sure.
there is always this hyper local component. They make content for people in that specific marketplace.
One of the advantages to this faceless approach, and her, just to be clear, her name's Chesley.
Oh, I'm
Chesley
sorry.
McCarty.
I'm sorry.
I said it wrong to begin with. I'm sure she gets it a lot. One of the advantages of doing this is not only the amount of leverage you get.
For sure.
The amount of videos you can create without you ever having to be involved. The scale.
1,000%.
And I think that is why it's so attractive to so many people. And I think right now, a lot of us have probably told ourselves a story that in order for me to get good at social, I've got to be front and center.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think that has...
And not everybody's good at it.
Not everyone. Let's
right.
look at it differently.
Yeah.
Very few people are good at it.
Correct.
But it has been the barrier to entry for many people. And the good news is, and what we should celebrate and get excited about going to 25 is like, it's not anymore.
Yeah.
You don't have to. You can embrace the style.
And this goes back to a previous show or wherever you are in the sequence of this. If you go back to Notebook LM, you go back to some of these, 11 labs.
Yep.
Now you have all the tools and resources to do faceless content. Like, could you imagine a world where you walked into the Apple store and you're like, where's Steve Jobs? Somebody explain this. Like, that no longer exists. So when you think about like faceless brands, most of the brands we buy from are faceless, except for My Point. So can I transition to My Point? I think 2025 is going to be the year of influencer marketing finally gets to real estate.
Okay.
And I'll give you guys a case study. So my buddy Chad Cooper, shout out to Chad, Savannah's dad, by the way, Brian. So one of my rad like social media marketers. He calls me and he's like, "Hey man, I just bought a business." I'm like, "What'd you buy?" And he's like, "Rusty's potato chips." I'm like, "Oh, dude, Rusty's chips, right? Like all organic, whatever, blah, blah, blah." And I'm like, super cool. I'm a deal, guys. What'd you pay for it? Can I get into the deal? Like, what's the story? And he said, "I'm looking for ideas of ways to grow the brand." Like, he's like, "So I'm thinking about distribution, right?" Yeah. We all talk about distribution all the time. So, like, who do you know here? Who do you know here? Who do you know here? What do you guys do with the wine company? How are you getting it out? So we talked about some of that stuff. And then I'm like, if I were you, man, I would like look for influencers, like foodies in and around Orange County that you can pay $300, $600, $800, who will literally go on and do killer content. Yeah. And then they can or cannot collaborate with your channels. Yeah. And I started to think, could you, first of all, like, one of my buddies is probably the most notorious infomercial guy on the planet, right? His name is Ken Carey.
Great guy.
Did a couple shows with him. He's so next level. I mean, like 35 infomercials a year for literally like, I don't know, I want to say like 35 or 40 years. Like he's the legend of the space. And what he says is a great infomercial, you start out with a problem, you explain your solution. And then what you do is you have other relatable people talk about their experience and how they overcame it, what they did with it, including like the banjo fishing lure, which is like the latest one, which is hysterical. But then I thought, wow. So here's Chad Cooper, Rusty's Chips. Shout out to Chad. And literally he's got these like, super cool, foodies in Orange County going, "Hey, so today we're going to go check out Rusty's potato chips. Did you know that Orange County, California actually has their own potato chip company? I didn't know. Let's go." And he like walks through, shows, "Hey, look, these are the potatoes and this is how they're cutting them up. And this is how they put the salt and this is their secret formula. And this is how they cook them. And look, oh my God, they're letting me actually eat before they bag them. Oh my God, these are delicious." And I thought, holy shit. A really good agent could do the same exact thing with let's go walk through their new listing. Let's go preview what they do at an open house. I could begin to learn how you operate, like your mega open house, like your over the top open house. All of a sudden now I'm witnessing from an influencer's perspective or a local person in the community, which we would now call an influencer's perspective about how Sally does her business. Yeah. I think that is going to be bananas. And if you think about what was said not but 2 years ago when NIL came out for college athletes where they could suddenly be paid, you can still get college kids. You can get influencers. So I got to think of, share your thoughts on this. And then I'm going to give one of my recent buddies I got to just pull up her contact info, and I don't want to say her company name wrong, but I met a gal at through my buddy who runs like Men's Health magazine and like, all the like the crazy magazines like that. Right. Shout out to Eli Lipman.
Mm-hmm.
He introduced me to his buddy who she has an influencer. She has like 1,000 influencers that will go to parties as the best looking people inside the room.
Mm-hmm.
They will endorse your products. And these companies are everywhere. So you could probably just Google anyone and I'm going to pull up her company specifically. But what are your guys' thoughts on real estate agents having hyper local influencers start talking about their service, their experience, what they do, how they do it?
Yeah.
Am I crazy for 2025?
You first.
Well, you think about brands that have been built in the influencer age. Like AG1 is a great example.
Right.
Everyone who's watching who is on Instagram regularly probably has heard of or has seen an ad or maybe even uses Athletic Greens.
Yes.
And there is a whole wave of companies.
Yeah.
Apparel brands, health brands, beauty brands that have all built on this exact playbook. It hasn't come to real estate yet because I think right now, when you have a local product that you can only sell locally, it's been kind of the barrier to entry.
Sure.
But to your point, I think we've crossed the chasm on that.
We have.
I think we've been at a point now where these influencers are, for better or worse, are everywhere.
Right.
And I live in, you guys know this, because I complain about it constantly.
Never stop.
You don't live in Boston anymore.
I live in New Hampshire. Okay?
Oh, wait, you don't?
We got influencers in New Hampshire. Okay, so we got people who
are you one of them?
Influencing
are you
Hampshire?
Are you the ultimate New Hampshire?
So if we got, all I'm saying is if we got influencers in New Hampshire, they are everywhere.
Okay, so shout out to Olivia Ormos, ORMOS. Her company is Maven, MAVN, MAVN. Now, again, when you go to this site, what you're going to see, first of all, she is extremely diligent about who she lets in the door, who is allowed to be one of her influencers.
Yeah.
So she has a very specific niche, very specific target, whether it is to sell a product, promote a service, and or as I mentioned, just have the prettiest guys and gals show up to your party. That's her site right there, MAVN. And by the way, it'd be really interesting to see how many agents decide, could I be an influencer on Maven?
Yeah.
Because it'd be very few actually get through. But again, Maven is one. I'm not an investor. I love this gal. I love her company. But you can find multiple influencers in your marketplace and then go back to the creativity. Right?
Yeah.
How do I have this person introduce what I do in a creative way that isn't schleppy?
Interview clients.
Oh,
right.
Today I'm out interviewing, people that recently selected a real estate agent or, whatever that may be.
Do you know who uses influencers right now in real estate?
Who?
There's a company does. And it's probably, I'd argue, the best direct to consumer company we've seen in the last decade. And I'm not talking about Zillow.
Yeah.
Because Zillow.
Open door.
I've seen ads, right? Because I've been to their medical library. They use influencers. And so if a company like that is so data driven, that is so focused, and they can track everything from a click to a sale. Right. If they're using influencers, I think this is such a crazy prediction right now that is finally kind of coming home. Yeah. So this is exciting, man.
Yeah. It is. And I think the use cases are what matter right now. Like you mentioned the open house, touring a listing. You mentioned interviewing my clients or something to that effect. I think you have to determine what are the viable use cases where an influencer in my local marketplace would have validity.
Right. Well, I think it'd be, even just like, I think interviewing clients, open houses, day in the life. I was thinking about becoming a real estate agent, and I decided I would follow an agent in my marketplace.
That's good.
Yeah. Something like that. And then so like they literally okay, so I'm about to go meet with, Sally, who's this, she works at Pantana. Hey Sally, how's it going? Right. Yeah. And then we watch Sally, in whatever that like 30-second, 90-second clip is. Yeah. And obviously they're going to be highlighting everything about that makes her special, that makes her unique, that makes her stand out. Yeah. And the good news is most of these influencers today, depending upon how much you're going to pay, you're going to script this thing out. But when I was watching the Rusty stuff, it was just, it was so organic. And these people are like, so like over the top, like, oh, these chips are so incredible, right? Yes. That I was like, I know the guy and I have like 500 bags in my house, but like, yes, I want more Rusty's chips. I think it's just going to be one more arrow in the quiver
Sure.
of
Yeah.
the person that wants to create a degree of separation
Yeah.
in their business. And if you think about it, like, you know, when we send like a pre-listing package, or we send hey, before we get together to onboard you as a client, as a buyer, if there was one or two of these videos inside there, like just how electric that is, how different that is compared to everybody else.
Well, I can already think of a couple examples where you have photographer and videographers who are, you call it, their day job is that,
Yes.
and their part-time side gig is an influencer.
Yes.
Bringing those two worlds together make a ton of sense. I think the thing that jumps out to me though, as you go through all of this, is that ultimately the beauty of a strategy like this is that a creator knows how to create content.
Yes.
You don't have to give them a script.
No.
You don't have to give them the
that's
brief.
right. No.
You like, you can say, listen, you're the creator. You got the
Yes.
follower. You
Yes.
just figure out what angle you think would work.
Yeah.
And I think like that's
Right.
to me,
Even
that's
better.
such a point of leverage for everyone right now to take advantage of. So I'm just a huge fan of like, let them take the lead on it and go.
So I want to know in the comments below before we go to Jason. So you went faceless.
Faceless.
And I said influencers.
Yeah.
So far it has nothing to do with you.
Yes.
And I'm not saying you're bad in any way, shape, or form, but it is we're trying to do next level. What's going to be different? What's going to be out of the box for 2025? So far in the comments, what are you thinking? I want to read the comments. So please give me feedback. Give us feedback. Jason.
Yes.
Faceless influencers.
So good.
What are you thinking about to be on the cutting edge to create the market of one? What do
So-
they have to do? What are you thinking about?
So I think it builds on both of your ideas. I think this works in 2024. This has always worked, and it will work even more in 2025. And the stakes are continuing to get higher. And that is, you have to be the best at marketing your listings in 2025.
Yeah.
I think you have to be able, I've been calling it a seller's stage. Imagine you own the club and you decide what bands play on your stage.
Yeah.
You got to start to look at your marketing as assets that the seller who wants their home to sell for the best terms possible will crave working with an agent who can give them what others can't. So what are the points of differentiation to compete on? I was thinking about Brad McCallum when we were talking.
So over the top, which I just love.
Well, and it's, I mean, hard to compete with a guy like that in his marketplace. And if you don't know Brad, he's on YouTube. The guy absolutely crushes it with some of the best listing property tours anywhere, to the point where sellers will seek him out because only he can give it to them.
From $350,000 condos to $10 million, luxury mansions that sometimes aren't his listing.
Right.
And everything in between. But it's what Timmy Smith did early on.
Yes.
Tim in his marketplace became, if you felt you had a fantastic home, that there was only one agent to call. And it was to the point, and I know Brad, I'm sure gets the same thing. Tim would go on appointments and they would say, walk through our house. What video are you going to shoot?
That's right.
Right. Like, first of all, I think that's a come list me.
Yeah.
I don't think there's, what's the presentation after that? Well, I'm going to come with my team. We're going to do a creative thing, but let's go and sign the agreement. Right. Like it was so incredible hearing that. I'm like, that was the goal. He became the market of one. So give us 3 different things someone should be thinking about.
Yes.
If they want to create videos and they don't have Brad's budget, they don't have Timmy's, $25 million ocean fronts.
Absolutely.
Right.
And they're not as charismatic.
So the example I'm thinking of, the example I'm thinking of is charismatic, but there's one of our great coaching clients. His name is John Port.
Yeah.
He's in Delaware County. His team is called Selling Delco. And you made me think of him when you talked about Tim Smith, because he'll have people say, hey, we're not planning to sell our house, but we already know the video we want when we do. It's like, it's that powerful.
So good. So good.
He has done this remarkable job of blending local influence with the house. And his shtick, I guess you could say, is he's always eating a sandwich from one of the local shops somewhere at the start of every listing video. And they always want to know, where'd you get that sandwich from, or what sandwich you're going to eat.
I love that.
He's doing it on Facebook.
Having that as a hook, something memorable every single time. Right?
He's doing a remarkable job, and they're selling hundreds of homes a year in Delaware County. And the dude is the dominant listing agent. His retention and repeat referral is off the charts. And most of what they're getting is on Facebook. That's mostly where they're getting the action.
I love it.
And so when you look at his videos, he is a pretty funny guy. And sometimes he'll push the envelope on his videos, and he's creative. But I don't think it takes a huge budget. It's not a fancy edited video. It just works.
Okay. So that's one. Give me another example of so either someone that they should follow and or another style of listing.
So let's talk about what we talked. You want the one we did the webinar on that we didn't do with Tom?
That you didn't invite
Are
me
you
to?
thinking about
Thanks.
Sam, or who are you thinking about?
Well,
If you'd like to be on my show, I'm looking for new people that I could have on my show because they're like doing
I'll let
like
you set
something
that
on
one
their
up.
own.
Which
now.
webinar was it that we did without Tom that you're thinking of?
Let's not open that
It
box.
would be
out.
the last one, is what I hope.
So just one quick aside. I'm passing back to you for number 2 here because a great point. I'm actually seeing that creator. One example I saw recently, which is if you think about a listing video, because I totally agree with this concept of investing in your listings. There's the really big production.
Yes.
There's the 4 or 5 minute 90-second reel or 5 minute video. But then there's also these like little clips, and we all remember Vine.
Oh,
Remember and what happened to
7
Vine?
seconds.
It was like, I mean, it was TikTok before TikTok.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so I'm seeing a little bit of a trend right now. And there's an agent, and we'll drop it in the show notes. It's Phoenix agent. She goes, "Hey, Phoenix, can you guess what neighborhood this is in?" And she does like, she's just driving, and it's on a loop like that. It had like 300,000 views, 1,000 comments. So I think you can take a listing and you can, and this is my advice for everyone listening, which is the more ordinary the listing, the more extraordinary your marketing needs to be.
It's really good.
You know, it's like, and so you have to find creative ways to kind of get more attention to those listings.
Who was the gal you showed me? Claremont Fixer with a pool.
Yeah. So
And she's not in the video.
Yep.
And the entire time on the Instagram reel, all it says is Claremont Fixer with a pool. And then she just walked through and showed you everything, including the pool.
Yeah.
And she got 53 leads from an Instagram reel because she used, put in the chat, I forget what it was, like Fixer or whatever it was.
So
it was 12,000 views, 54 leads, text inbound leads off of and by the way, this creator, her name's Esther. She's out of California. She has less than 2,000 followers. She has more now because we keep talking about her.
Shout out to you, Esther.
And she's done a
Esther, will you be an influencer for me?
but she just, it's a perfect example of a
different style.
A different style for the same thing Jason's talking about, which is promoting your listing. So that's at least my take on it, Jason.
I think we have to talk about Instagram for a second, about what's happening right now on Instagram, that it builds on your idea here.
Sure.
How is it that it's getting so good at determining who to suggest your content to based upon your geographic area?
Yes.
And I would argue the reason is because Missouri, CEO of Instagram, made a comment a few months ago that says the number one most important algorithmic metric that Instagram is looking at that will determine how much oomph it puts behind your next post is what's called sends per reach. They're looking at how many people, if you reach 1,000 accounts, how many of those accounts hit the little paper airplane and share it with their buddies.
Yeah.
And they now, why do they care about that metric? They care about that metric because it was an edge against TikTok. Is the number one reason.
Yeah.
But that metric, so when you make hyper-local content and it shows up in front of you, you're not going to send it to somebody who doesn't have an interest in your hyperlocal area.
Right.
And so when you make hyperlocal content, you're effectively creating an opportunity for your own people reached to tell the algorithm, send it to more people who live in these areas, because that's the geographic tie that keeps them all together. And so I think those short little videos like that, a lot of people might have a reluctance to say, it's just a little thing that's not going to work.
Yeah.
But actually, if you do that over and over and over again, not only is it easy, but you're going to create so much authority on that. That's a really easy to replicate strategy.
My concern is someone's going to hear that and they're going to start saying on every video, send this to a friend.
Sure. I'll give you a way to do this. That is, and this goes back to Chesley McCarty, who does a great job with this.
Oh yeah.
She doesn't say send this to a friend. She says, sending this to my New York City friends who refuse to move to DC. So she puts herself into it.
Yes.
So now you're like, now you get your arm around her, like, oh, what is she sending to her friend? So she uses a small shift in the language to encourage behavior.
Subtle.
So
subtle, but still effective.
And we'll drop a link to an example of this, but all she does, you can see this video here. She's got 670,000 views, and look at what she does. I didn't know this neighborhood existed when I first moved to DC. There's no audio. It's just music and a listing.
I didn't know.
And that stays there the entire time.
So much curiosity in that too.
For sure.
And
and the house looks adorable.
It's very
too.
charming.
You're like, oh wow, like I want to know that. It feels like you're like in England.
It's very awesome.
And that's DC.
Or DC.
Right? Apparently. So this idea of to your point, this idea of embedding commands of what you want the consumer to do when they watch your video. Do you want them to comment, text me? Do you want them to send it and share with their friend? Do you want them to actually reach out to you?
Yeah.
Being clear on that with your marketing is going to drive performance.
Well, and I would argue there's an opportunity to R&D here where if it were me, I would go look at those accounts that you just listed.
Yeah.
I would take their messages. I would explain to a tool like ChatGPT, this is what I'm trying to do. Can you give me 40 other versions of this that I can use and keep sort of in my cache memory?
Let's go back. I totally agree with that, Jason. And let's go back to one thing that's really important. Because this goes back to, we're talking about predictions here, guys. We talked about the Faceless creator. We talked about the influencer. We talked about doubling down on your listings. The thing that everyone should prepare for, this is my prediction, we should prepare for a much longer sales cycle. And so that means you should think about ways to, yes, launch your listing, but figure out as you're getting ready to prepare the home for the market, can you capture 7 or 10 additional smaller campaigns that you have in the bag to drip out at week 8 when the seller has no offers?
Chris Benjamin. No, Chris Benjamin did this. Remember, he talked about it at the summit one year. Shout out to Chrissy B. He said, every time we go out to shoot that initial listing video, we create 7 to 8 additional pieces of content while we're there. So whether it was one of our longer sales cycle or it's the pre-sold sales cycle, right? But it's just efficiency.
And I can't remember, I forget who it was, but there was a Tom X talk at the summit this year, and she said the same. She's doing the same thing.
Yeah. It's just, as you're thinking
about who you are,
just drop a comment.
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay. So I want to know really quick as we wrap this up, what is your out of the box prediction for marketing in 2025 for you to become the market of one? What are you going to do differently? Of course, if my dad was here, you know what he would say? Make your damn phone calls. And you should do that too. And he makes his phone calls and he creates content. So it's the 1-2 punch, always and forever. Sales and marketing, always tied together. All right, fellas, this was a really fun show. All right, let us know in the comments below. Should these guys invite me to these secret shows that they're doing? Should I find
You're always
people
invited, Tom,
to have on my shows? Just you guys are just, I'm going to only do my show with this guy now. Like, I'm not sure. All right, thanks so much for watching. Can't wait to read your comments. We'll see you on the next one.
All of the best players have the best coaches. You and your business are no different. It's time to get in the game. Find your real estate coach today.
Creating a detailed business plan is like building a launch pad. No matter where you are in your business, we have a plan for you. It's time to lock in your trajectory for a successful 2025. Your business plan is waiting for you at tomferry.com.
So if you asked me what is one of the most important currencies in business, what is it that allows someone to have an enduring, long career where they don't fade out, but they continue to get better and better and better? It would be just one word. In the comments, what do you think that word is? I would love to know your opinion. I can tell you 3.5 decades later, it's one thing: trust. Trust is the most important currency in business. And if you don't think that's the case, try being a business without trust and let me know what happens. When you think about the most enduring brands, when you think about, cars that became lemons, right? I think of, there was a wonderful car. I think it was called the Chevelle. No, it wasn't the Chevelle. It'll hit me in a little bit. But if you look at the car, when you Googled it, and I got to get the name, I'm totally embarrassed by this. One of you is going to know because it was the most unsafe car at every speed documented ever. And they sold a ton of them because it was such a unique looking car. Trust is everything for you and I in business. It's our reviews. It's what people say about us. So the question for you guys is, if I was sitting here watching this show today and I was a new agent, I was a veteran agent who felt like I was losing my touch with my database, or I wanted to re-engage my database in a way that was meaningful and not just always selling, right?
Sure.
What are some of the things that I need to be thinking about doing to amplify trust, to create trust? And in case you're wondering, if I see one of you put trustworthy on your business card, I'm going to punch you in the face because there is nothing worse than that.
So there's this concept in brand strategy, which is make your brand easy to share. And so you and I were in Toronto recently, and we stayed at the Four Seasons.
Yeah.
And this was the first time I went to a Four Seasons. And I like bougie hotels.
Yes, you do.
So if you've never been to a Four Seasons, you have this like little iPad where you can text them at any point, not call, you can text them and they will do anything and bring you anything.
Yes.
And I abuse that to the point where I don't think I'll ever be invited back to a Four Seasons again. And what's interesting is I have told every person I know how amazing that experience was.
Right.
Just being able to text them and ask them questions and get them to bring me stuff.
Right.
And so I think right now what happens is the reason that we struggle with trust in our industry is because we haven't given our happy customers enough memorable moments to share. Mm-hmm. And the more that we think about that, the experience, the more that we create these moments that people want to talk about, share about, post about. And I'll give you an example of this. I saw this recently. And I'm going to forget the agent's name, but I'll find it here and I'll drop it in the show notes for you guys. She goes, the title of her Instagram reel was, "Here's what happens when you hire me." And it was a photo shoot of the buyers who just purchased this house. Professional photographer came in there and they were moving in the house, and it's this beautiful family, this beautiful photography, photos. So it was an ad for this agent that got 120,000 views, 3,000 likes, tons of shares off of it. And so for me,
and was it photos of clients over and over and over and over?
No. She hired a photographer to do like welcome home, and they got like their new home family photos done.
Exactly.
Got it.
And so
that's beautiful. I know. Okay, I just want to get the distinction.
And so you can imagine how many people that family shared those photos. I bet you those photos are hanging up in their house. So when friends come by, you got Agent A's fridge magnet, and then you got like these beautiful photos of the family when they moved into their house. And the first thought I had when I saw that story, I said, "Damn, I wish I had that." When we bought our house, I wish we had that, because that was a great moment. Yeah. And so I think when it comes to trust, is that how do you create experiences that are worth sharing, that are memorable, that would encourage our happy customers to be our brand advocates. Because it's not about what we say, it's about what the people we work with say about us.
It reminds me of Purple Cow by Seth Godin as well. Sure. Like, how do you become, and I know it's not quite the same idea, but he talks a lot about being remarkable. What is something that is worthy of a remark? Yeah. And he does more of a path of, something new or innovative in some way. But I think this idea of getting people to talk, it also reminds me of the referral engine core talkable difference. What's your core talkable difference that is exciting or new or innovative, or just goes above and beyond in a way that gets the customer to really think, I can't help but share this with other people.
Well, it's a great point. And I'm reminded of when we were on stage together at Summit, we were interviewing a bunch of agents. Jill Biggs was one of them.
That's right.
And Jill Biggs shared how she circled prospects. And I love this story, where she basically has the seller, it seems like she forces them to do it, but she has the seller write a letter to all the other neighbors, right, under protest, about how great Jill is. And she told me this story. I'm like, that is such a brilliant approach to circle prospecting. So come back to your question around trust. How we get our customers to talk about us in an organic way that then becomes the marketing we put in front of new consumers who have no idea who we are.
Yes. So as we say this, I want to get back to the engineering side of this. Yeah. Because too often I think we find ourselves saying more reviews, more testimonials, and all of that I think is super important, right? I think in a 2025 marketing environment, not having that, you're not even in the game. So let's just assume you have to be reliable. You have to be somewhat likable, and likable is different for everybody. You got to deliver on what you promise. Yeah. Right? You got to let people know you delivered on what you promised. So maybe a checklist that maybe other people don't have. Maybe it's the way you follow up and the way you communicate. Hey, just want to touch base, letting you know, once again, this week we did A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. Here's the results, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. But it becomes this automated experience, because when we look at the opposite of trust, right? The thing that we don't want, it is like, how do you create that? You don't deliver on the promise. Sure. You don't follow up. You're not reliable. I think trust, like the note I wrote down is, trust is earned in the dark. Yeah. It's earned behind the scenes. Yeah. Right. It is in these little things that we do. Like, I think about, like, how many coaching clients have you talked to that, like, I talk to people every day, text, email, whatever, phone calls, and they're not my personal client, but I do something for them because they reach out to me and they've got a very specific situation. And then I follow up on it, and then I see him and I remember that, and I bring it up to him, and I get this warm, like, I'm not going to say her name yet, because I'm going to surprise everybody probably at the summit. She's down now like 85 pounds. She has been texting me every day, the scale, right? I mean, put it this way. If she walked up today and you didn't see her face, I would recognize her feet. You with me? Because it's her feet on the scale. And when she got under 200 pounds, like, I was freaking out, because we've been working on this for a year. Like, that's in the dark. That's behind the scenes.
Sure.
You with me? And that's not going to be a Google review. That's not going to be like, I'm talking about it now on a podcast, and I'm intentionally not saying her name because we want to celebrate it. Like, I'm so damn proud of her. But trust is earned in the dark. I don't know if that's the right way to say it.
So
it's behind the scenes.
I love that. A couple of things stand out to me. One, I think it's really important for anybody listening or watching right now to take inventory on your true value proposition. Because if you're clear about what is the service I provide to my customers, and if I can't conclusively state it's A, B, C, and D, then I think that it's probably time to look at that and say, it's time for me to isolate what that is. And maybe that's a survey with your past customers. And maybe it's trying to figure out what really resonated. I'm thinking about our great coaching clients, the FARs, Far Group Northwest out in Spokane. We did a little experiment where we took all their Google reviews. And I know you just said it's not a Google review. We took all their Google reviews, we fed it into Tom AI. Tom AI analyzed the sentiment and subtext, and we prompted it with a specific ask. Hey, we're looking for not on the surface observations. What is the subtext? What is the sentiment of our customers that led them to want to hire us, or what did they think was most valuable about our services? And when we looked at it, what we found was consistently, and it made sense after the fact. Consistently, it said the FARs treated us like family.
Sure.
And what we realized in hindsight was most of their business was inbound migration coming from California to Spokane. And these folks, they found them on Instagram, got the attention on Instagram. They DM'd them, so the marketing worked. But then what really stood out to them, the thing they really valued the most that they didn't know they were looking for up front, was we need to get connected to the community. We don't know anybody up here. And so we actually, the FARs, they developed a program called FAR Group Family. And they now talk about it at their listing appointments because they took the time to do the research and understand what were those moments that really caused their clients to think, wow, that was the difference.
This reminds me of, shout out to Lisa Munoz in Austin, who's another one of these I just grabbed her randomly on stage at the summit this year, even though we had done a podcast that was bananas. And if you haven't listened to it, you should listen to it. I think trust is established with a proper intake form. In the onboarding of a client.
Sure.
So she, people moving in and out of Austin all the time. But when you work with Lisa and her team, like, they carefully curated a bunch of questions. Like, they want to know, like, do you like an oat milk latte or do you prefer an Americano? Right. Like, like, what kind of food do you like? Are you vegan? Do you have a dog? Do you have a cat? Do you love animals? Like, do you not love animals? It's not. So you guys are moving to town. Like, how many bedrooms and baths do you want? Like, that's in there, but they want to know everything about him. And then you feel like almost like you're joining like a special club. And then if you look at her Care Bear strategy, which is how she nurtures clients post a transaction. Like, when I interviewed her on the show, it was remarkable. She's like, look, I have this gal. She was a transaction coordinator for me. She was, like, admittedly not super detail oriented, kind of the wrong person you want for that. But what she was a love bug on her clients. So she's like, so I said, hey, how about doing this role instead? She's like, what is it? She's like, I don't know. Care Bear, like the television show, right? The cartoon. And what this gal did was she would just go into Facebook, go into Instagram, and look at the intake forms on these clients. And then, like, what can I do to make that person feel special? What can I do? And it was again, carefully curated onboarding experience for a client, more than just bedrooms and baths. So then in their follow-up, it was personalized, which is surprising we haven't talked about as a marketing strategy, because it's everything today, right? Personalization. Maybe we've beaten the point in everybody's head, but I think that's another way to establish trust.
Sure.
And then imagine if she stopped doing it. Wow. She would break trust. Now, you would slowly erode trust over time. It's not like, hey, Jason, I'm going to call you Tuesday at 5 and you don't.
Right.
Like, that's a more immediate break in trust. As an example, did you hear what I just said? That's a more immediate break in trust versus I'm going to slowly erode my trust over time because I'm no longer connecting in that way.
Yeah.
Right. Then I don't become top of mind, the agent of choice, the market of one.
What you're describing is, and I think it's really important people listen to this. What you're describing is if the customer has a set of expectations in their mind, which all of them do.
Yes.
And you don't get that information from them during the onboarding process.
Yep.
Then they have told themselves a story about what's going to happen when they list their house with you.
Yep.
And so you could be unintentionally destroying trust because of a failure to properly kind of onboard these new customers. And I think that's probably more common than not, which is the reason why I looked at the data on this while you guys are talking. The average consumer will spread a negative review to 2 to 3 times more people than a positive review.
Yep.
They'll share with 9 to 16 people.
Yep.
And so the reason that many agents right now maybe don't get the referrals that they deserve is because they haven't gone through the process of understanding what are the expectations. We all want to set expectations, but what do you have in your mind as your expectations as an example? So I just think this is it's a deep conversation that's so much more important than, as you say, your onboarding checklist. It's really about understanding the customer's need and then getting everybody in alignment before you start the process.
Right.
Jimmy, I'm thinking we shared this at Summit that expectations can only be met when understood by all parties. But I think this idea that
say
you're
that
getting,
one more time, please.
My broker
Slowly.
taught it to me.
Yeah.
Expectations can only be met when understood by all parties. However, I think what you said, like, how are you can't possibly fulfill someone's expectations if you don't know what they are.
Sure.
And so I think, and that takes me to your idea of the intake form. What a practical
it sounds like
strategy.
a successful marriage, by the way, too.
It does, right? It does.
How is it best for me to communicate with you?
Yeah.
Right. Like it's so, but you're saying the same exact thing for a successful relationship that you want to endure over time. Like, why is it that we have clients that have been with us for decades?
Really good.
Right. Because you know what they want. You understand their needs. You try and deliver on them over and over and over. Right. And do we all make mistakes? 1000%. We're human. Like, we're going to make mistakes. But if you build up that trust engine strong enough, it can handle some of the negative impacts of life experiences, interest rates going to 8s, me saying the wrong thing from the stage occasionally, every now and then, missing their name, which drives me completely insane. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to have those. All right. So we got to wrap it up. This is an interesting one. I'm curious for you watching the comments. What are the books you've read or the things you've studied or your insights around trust? I'll give a shout out to my buddy Todd Duncan, who wrote, I think, one of the great sales books of all time called High Trust Selling. Yeah. And really it is about relationship selling. Like, how do you stay in a deep level of trust and rapport with customers? Big shout out to you, Todd. Mortgage guy, mortgage coach, known him for I think my entire adult life. Yeah. All right. So this was a really interesting show. Appreciate you guys. Let us know in the comments and we got to bounce. We'll see you on the next one. Take care.